She hadn't walked in years until this boy arrived and changed everything. Emily Thompson watched sadly as the other children played in the square through the window of her grandparents' house, where she had lived since the accident. 3 years confined to that wheelchair felt like an eternity for a girl of just 8 years old. Before, she had been known as the Hurricane Girl for her boundless energy, always the first to climb trees, the fastest in school races, the one who invented the boldest games. Now only memories remained of a life that seemed to belong to someone else. It was a July morning when Nathan arrived at the Thompson mansion in Greenwich, the mountainous region of New York. The sky was particularly blue that day, with lush mountains framing the horizon, a beauty Emily rarely noticed anymore. Mrs. Margaret, Emily's grandmother, had hired Sarah, the boy's mother, as the new physical therapist after all the other professionals had given up on helping Emily walk again. The 6th therapist in 3 years. The hiring came with an unusual condition. During school breaks, her 9-year-old son would need to accompany her. "I'm a single mother," Sarah had explained during the interview. "I have no one to leave Nathan with during the holidays." "I don't want that kid here, Grandma," Emily protested, crossing her arms tightly. "He'll stare at me like I'm some zoo animal, just like all the other boys do. Remember Jennifer's son? He wouldn't stop asking why I couldn't get up and run." Emily still vividly remembered the occasional visits from children to the mansion, family friends' kids or employees' children, and how their curious or pitying looks made her feel even more isolated. After the last disastrous visit, when a boy loudly asked if she'd be crippled forever, Emily had begged her grandparents not to allow any more children in the house. Mrs. Margaret sighed, deeply adjusting her glasses on her time-worn face. At 67, she carried not just the weight of age but also the responsibility of raising her granddaughter after the tragedy that took her parents, a task she had never felt fully prepared for. "Emily, sweetheart, we have no choice. Sarah is considered the best pediatric physical therapist in the state. She worked at Hope Medical Center for 15 years before opening her own practice. And she only accepted the job if she could bring her son during the breaks. Dr. Richardson said she has revolutionary methods that could help in cases like yours." Emily's expression remained stubborn, her gaze fixed on the well-kept garden. She hadn't stepped foot in for so long. "I don't care if she's the best in the world. The doctors already said I'll never walk again." Mrs. Margaret's heart ached. Her husband, William Thompson, was one of the most influential businessmen in the region, owner of a luxury hotel chain. Money had never been an issue, but no fortune in the world had been able to restore her granddaughter's steps. The tragedy that changed Emily's life happened during a school trip to an ecological park in the Appalachian Mountains. It was supposed to be a day of adventure and discovery, studying the flora and fauna of the Blue Ridge Forest. Emily, always ahead of the group, had wandered off slightly to photograph a rare blue butterfly of stunning beauty. That was when the unthinkable happened. Heavy rains in the previous days had weakened the terrain, and a landslide caught the group by surprise. Emily was the most severely affected, partially buried for nearly 20 minutes before rescuers could reach her. The physical trauma was severe, but the psychological damage was devastating. Those minutes of darkness, suffocation, and absolute terror never fully left her. The doctors diagnosed an incomplete spinal cord injury, which meant she could walk, again with intensive physical therapy. "You're lucky," the neurosurgeon had said after the emergency surgery. "A few more inches, and the injury would have been complete and permanent." But after countless painful sessions with no visible progress, 6 months of exercises that seemed to lead nowhere, of stifled tears as her body refused to obey, of pitying glances following her wherever she went, the girl had given up. "My body is broken," she declared one day, with a finality that frightened her grandparents. "There's no point in trying to fix it." The specialists had explained that the barrier wasn't just physical, but psychological. The trauma of the accident had created mental blocks that prevented Emily from progressing. "Her brain still associates movement with pain and danger," a child psychologist explained to her grandparents. "Until that association is broken, it will be hard to make progress in therapy." William Thompson, a businessman accustomed to solving problems with money and influence, found himself powerless in the face of his granddaughter's situation. He tried everything: the best doctors in the country, experimental treatments, even a trip to a rehabilitation center in the United States. Nothing worked. Gradually, Emily withdrew into her own world, taking refuge in books and drawings, avoiding any talk of the accident or her future. Her once vibrant personality gave way to a melancholy quietness that broke the hearts of everyone around her. The next morning, the sound of children's laughter echoed through the mansion, something that hadn't happened in a long time. Martha, the housekeeper who had worked for the Thompsons for over 20 years, paused in the hallway at the nearly forgotten sound. With misty eyes, she quickly made the sign of the cross. "May the Virgin Mary bring life back to this house," she murmured to herself. Mrs. Margaret led Sarah and Nathan to Emily's room, passing through hallways decorated with family photos. In one, a 5-year-old Emily grinned widely, showing off a missing front tooth perched on her father's shoulders during a beach outing. In another, the whole family, Emily and her parents, posed in front of the mansion, unaware of the tragedy that would separate them just months later. The boy, with messy brown hair and wearing a striped shirt with paint stains on the sleeves, carried a worn-out backpack and a natural smile on his face. Unlike his mother, who seemed nervous about her first day of work, Nathan exuded a quiet confidence, as if visiting strangers' homes and meeting kids in wheelchairs were the most natural thing in the world. "Emily, this is Sarah, your new physical therapist, and this is her son, Nathan," Mrs. Margaret introduced. Emily merely nodded, not looking up from the book she pretended to read. "Hi, Emily," Nathan greeted, stepping casually toward the wheelchair. "Wow, you have an amazing room. Look at this view of the mountains. Can I see your books?" Without waiting for an answer, he was already examining the shelf. Emily shot a pleading glance at her grandmother, who discreetly left the room with Sarah, to let the children get to know each other. "Do you like adventure?" Nathan asked, pulling a book from the shelf. "I do too. My favorite is this one, The Adventures of Captain Thunder. Have you read it?" Emily remained silent, trying to ignore him. "Hey, I brought my handheld game. Wanna play?" Nathan persisted, as if he didn't notice her resistance. "Why are you pretending not to see it?" Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling with anger. "See what?" Nathan asked, confused, looking up from the book in his hands. "This." Emily pointed at the wheelchair. "Everyone looks at this first, then at me, like the chair is more important than I am. It's as if I were just the girl in the wheelchair." Emily was used to the script of interactions, the initial look of surprise, quickly followed by forced normalcy, words carefully chosen to avoid mentioning her condition. Or worse, the invasive questions. "Will you never walk again?" "How do you go to the bathroom?" "Isn't it so sad to be in a wheelchair forever?" Nathan shrugged with a naturalness Emily didn't expect. There was none of that artificial tension in his shoulders, nor the overly cautious words adults always used. "So what if you're in a wheelchair? My cousin used one for 6 months after she broke her leg skiing. And my Uncle Robert's been in one for years because of a back problem. It doesn't stop you from playing video games, does it?" He shook the handheld console in his hand. "I bet I can teach you the secret combos in under an hour. Unless you're scared of losing, of course." The response left Emily speechless. For the first time in a long while, someone was talking to her, not to the girl in the wheelchair. There was no pity in his eyes, just a direct and honest challenge. Emily hesitated, her fingers drumming on the armrest. It had been so long since anyone had challenged her to anything, treated her like a competitor instead of a poor thing. A tiny spark of her old competitive spirit flickered inside her. "I'll learn it in half an hour," she finally replied, reaching for the console. Nathan grinned triumphantly, as if that small victory was exactly what he'd been waiting for. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her, explaining the game controls. He didn't ask for permission, didn't treat Emily like she was made of glass. He just kept talking, sometimes pausing to point out a special move on the screen, sometimes joking about his own mistakes when Emily managed to beat him. Mrs. Margaret, who had lingered by the door ready to step in if Emily felt uncomfortable, watched the scene with a mix of surprise and hope. It was the longest Emily had gone interacting, with someone without her wheelchair or the accident being mentioned. In the days that followed, while Sarah tried unsuccessfully to get Emily to engage in traditional physical therapy, Nathan would show up in her room with adventure books, strategy board games, and fantastical stories he made up on the spot. Ever heard of the lost island of Avalon, he'd ask, lying on the floor with his arms outstretched as if floating. They say it only appears once every 100 years, when the stars align just right. Then he'd launch into an elaborate tale about explorers, hidden treasures, and mysterious sea creatures. At first, Emily resisted, feigning indifference, or replying in monosyllables. But the boy's cheerful persistence wore down her carefully built walls. Slowly, she found herself eagerly waiting for Nathan's visits, even adding details to his stories or correcting him when he messed up the continuity. "Nathan, you don't understand," Emily said after a week of daily visits. "I can't play like other kids. I can't run, jump, or explore places like in the books we read." Nathan thought for a moment. "Who says exploring means just walking? Astronauts explore space by floating. Divers explore the ocean by swimming. Why can't you explore your own way?" That's when Nathan had an idea that changed everything. The next day, he arrived with art supplies, paper, colored pencils, paints, and brushes. "Let's make our own adventure story," he announced, excitedly. "You draw better than me, so you can do the illustrations." "How do you know I draw well?" asked Emily, surprised. "I saw your drawings on the table," replied Nathan, pointing to a folder. "They're incredible. They look like they were done by a professional artist." Emily couldn't help but smile slightly, the first genuine smile in a long time. It was true that she loved to draw. It was one of the few activities that still brought her joy. In the lonely days after the accident, her sketchbooks had become her refuge, a place where she could create worlds without limitations, where she could run, jump, and explore, even if only through the strokes of her pencil. "My mother was an artist," Emily revealed, opening a drawer and pulling out a carved wooden case. "She painted landscapes. Dad used to say she captured the soul of places. She taught me to draw before I even learned to write." It was the first time Emily had mentioned her parents willingly since the sessions began. Sarah, who was quietly observing, made a mental note for her report. Emily opened the case, revealing pencils of different hardnesses, carefully arranged. A gift from her mother on the last birthday they spent together. "She said each pencil tells a different story," Emily continued, running her fingers gently over them. "The softer ones for gentle shadows, the harder ones for precise lines." The story project began that very day, emerging organically from the unexpected connection between the children. The Explorer of Impossible Worlds would be about a girl who discovered portals to other dimensions in ordinary objects. An old mirror, a mysterious book, even a simple rock with an unusual shape. Each object, Nathan suggested, could lead to a different world with its own rules and challenges. In some, gravity worked differently. In others, colors had sounds and sounds had flavors. "And the explorer never knows what she'll find on the other side," he explained excitedly, gesturing widely. "But she always finds a way to overcome the challenges, even when they seem impossible at first." Nathan crafted the wild narratives, his imagination running free like a river without barriers, while Emily illustrated them with astonishing detail for someone so young. Her skilled hands brought to life fantastical landscapes, extraordinary creatures, and at the center of it all, the explorer, a girl with dark hair and determined eyes, always moving forward, no matter how strange or frightening the world before her. Mrs. Margaret watched, amazed at the transformation in her granddaughter. Emily now woke up eager for Nathan's arrival, planning new chapters of the story and preparing drawings to show her friend. Mr. William, Emily's grandfather, who traveled constantly for work, was stunned when he returned from a trip to hear his granddaughter laughing for the first time in years. "What's going on here?" he asked Mrs. Margaret after hearing laughter coming from Emily's room. "It's the therapist's son, William. It seems he's done what no doctor or therapist could so far, made Emily want to live again." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Sarah, observing the growing friendship between the children, decided to incorporate Emily's new motivation into her treatment. Instead of traditional physical therapy sessions, which the girl hated, she suggested missions related to the story they were creating. Emily, to draw this part where the explorer crosses a river of lava, you'll need to strengthen your arms, Sarah explained, demonstrating exercises that felt like play. And to create the dimensional portal, you'll need to improve finger mobility. The strategy worked brilliantly. Emily, without realizing it, was performing the exercises she had previously refused, eager to improve her drawings and continue the story with Nathan. After 3 weeks of treatment disguised as play, Sarah noticed significant progress in Emily's muscle strength. During a private conversation with Mrs. Margaret and Mr. William, she shared her observations. The tests show Emily has more sensitivity in her legs than we thought. I believe the blockage is more psychological than physical at this point. The trauma of the accident made her create a mental barrier. William Thompson, a practical man accustomed to solving problems with money, frowned. And what do you suggest? Psychotherapy. We've already tried 3 different professionals. Emily refuses to talk about the accident. Sarah shook her head. I suggest we let Nathan keep doing what he's doing. He's managing to break through Emily's barriers without her even noticing. The next day, during another story-writing session, Nathan made an unusual request. Emily, we need the explorer to climb a mountain in this chapter, but I can't picture how it would look. Could you show me? Emily looked at her friend, confused. What do you mean, show you? I can't. Not with your legs, Nathan interrupted. With your arms. Imagine your arms are the explorer's legs. How would she climb? Hesitant at first, Emily began moving her arms, mimicking a climb. Her movements were restrained, timid, as if she'd forgotten how her own body worked. I think she'd need to find solid holds in the rock, like this, Emily demonstrated, stretching one arm up and to the side, and then test if they can hold her weight before pushing up. Amazing, Nathan exclaimed, watching closely. And how would she know which rocks are safe and which might come loose? The question piqued Emily's interest, and she began crafting a more detailed answer, her movements growing broader and more confident as she got absorbed in the explanation. She'd tap like this with her knuckles, Emily demonstrated, making a tapping motion in the air. Loose rocks sound hollow, and she'd also look for cracks where she could wedge her fingers firmly, like this. Without realizing it, Emily was performing the exact range of motion exercises Sarah had been trying to introduce in formal physical therapy sessions, exercises the girl had always resisted. Nathan kept encouraging her, asking questions, requesting more details, pretending not to understand certain movements so Emily would repeat them. What if the mountain had sections with different slopes? How would she adjust? He asked, quickly sketching different angles on paper. For nearly 20 minutes, Emily explained and demonstrated climbing techniques she'd learned from documentaries or adventure books before the accident. Unaware, she was exercising and, more importantly, visualizing movement in her own body. Her cheeks grew flushed, and a thin layer of sweat glistened on her forehead. Physical signs of effort Sarah observed with quiet, professional satisfaction. Now what if the explorer had to crawl through a narrow tunnel after the climb? Maybe a shortcut to reach the next portal? Nathan continued, introducing a new challenge that would require different movements. Emily half lay across the table, using her arms to show how the explorer would crawl through the tight space, explaining how she'd use her elbows and knees for propulsion. This seemingly innocent exercise of imagination turned into a pivotal moment when Emily, completely absorbed in the story and momentarily forgetting her limitations, tried to adjust her wheelchair's position by herself to reach a specific pencil that had fallen to the floor. In a moment of distraction, or perhaps of instinctive reconnection with her body, she lightly pushed the floor with her right foot to spin the chair. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible to a casual observer, but her legs responded slightly to the brain's command, something that hadn't happened voluntarily since the accident. Sarah, with her trained eyes, immediately grasped the significance of that moment, but kept a neutral expression, knowing that drawing attention to it might make Emily retreat into her usual defensive state. Sarah, who was discreetly watching from the doorway held back her emotion. It was the first voluntary movement Emily had made with her legs in 3 years. In the following days, Sarah introduced new exercises, always disguised as part of the story they were creating. Emily, engrossed in the narrative she was building with Nathan, didn't even realize she was doing physical therapy. It was during one of these creative sessions, nearly a month after Nathan's arrival, that the unthinkable happened. They were in the middle of a particularly exciting chapter of the explorer's story when Nathan, distracted by coloring the map he was drawing, placed the reference book they were using on a nearby table, just out of reach of Emily's wheelchair. "Nathan, grab that book for me," Emily asked, pointing to the table. "I need to check the name of that mountain we mentioned earlier." "I'm busy coloring the map of Shadow Valley," Nathan replied casually, without looking up from the paper. The tip of his tongue peeked out from the corner of his mouth as he focused on the drawing's details. "If you want it, try getting it yourself." The words fell between them like stones in a pond, sending ripples of immediate tension. It was the first time Nathan had directly referenced Emily's physical limitation in a way that challenged her. Emily huffed in irritation, her cheeks flushing with anger. "You know I can't," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "Are you being cruel on purpose?" Sarah, who had been discreetly supervising the interaction from across the room while organizing physical therapy equipment, froze, ready to intervene. But a quick glance from Nathan made her hesitate. The boy lifted his eyes from the drawing, staring directly at Emily. There was no cruelty in his gaze, only something Emily rarely saw in the eyes of those around her, genuine expectation without pity. "How do you know if you never try?" Nathan asked, his voice quiet but firm. The explorer wouldn't give up without at least trying, would she? Something in the boy's voice struck Emily deeply. It wasn't just the challenge in his words, but the genuine conviction in his eyes. Maybe it was the absence of pity, or the true belief that she could do more than she thought. For a moment, Emily saw herself through Nathan's eyes, not as a helpless victim, but as someone capable, someone who had simply forgotten her own strength. A distant memory surfaced, Emily at 5 years old, determined to climb a tall tree in the garden while everyone said it was too dangerous. "How do you know if you never try?" She had replied then, repeating the words she'd heard from her father. She had managed to climb that day, scraping her knees but reaching the highest branches, from where she could see the entire Thompson property. With renewed determination, Emily unlocked the wheels of her chair and moved closer to the table. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The book was just inches beyond her reach, taunting her with its tempting proximity. Sarah watched, holding her breath, torn between professional concern and curiosity about what would happen. Mrs. Margaret had stopped at the doorway, drawn by the raised voices, and now watched the scene with wide eyes, not daring to interrupt. On impulse, without thinking too much about what could go wrong, Emily pressed one hand firmly on the table's surface and tried to partially rise from her chair. At first, her legs felt like jelly, unable to bear any weight. A sharp pain shot through her back, nearly making her give up. But then, to her complete surprise, her weakened muscles responded. Her legs, though shaky and unsteady, held part of her weight for a few precious seconds, just long enough for her to stretch her free arm and reach the book with her other hand. The effort left her breathless, and she fell back into the chair with less grace than she would have liked. But the book was firmly in her grasp, a tangible proof of what she had just accomplished. I stood up," whispered Emily, her heart pounding against her ribs, her cheeks flushed with effort and emotion, hardly believing what had just happened. Her voice was a mix of astonishment and something almost forgotten: pride. "I really stood up." Nathan smiled but showed no surprise, as if he had always known she could do it. "Of course you did. You're Emily, the explorer of impossible worlds. Standing is just the beginning." That same day, during dinner, Emily surprised everyone by asking to try standing again, this time with help. "Nathan said I can be like the explorer in our story, and she never gives up." Mrs. Margaret and Mr. William exchanged emotional glances as Sarah helped Emily position herself between two chairs for support. With visible effort, The girl managed to stay on her feet for nearly 30 seconds. "How long until she walks again?" Mr. William asked Sarah later, after Emily had been put to bed. "I can't promise a timeline," Sarah replied cautiously. "But the fact that she wants to try is already a huge victory. The road will be long and hard with ups and downs. What matters is that Emily now believes it's possible." What no one expected was that the greatest challenge was yet to come, and it wouldn't be physical but emotional. The next morning, Emily woke up determined to show Nathan she had practiced standing. But when she tried to get up on her own, with no one around to help, she fell onto the bedroom floor. The noise alerted Mrs. Margaret, who rushed to her granddaughter's aid. She found Emily crying, not from physical pain but from frustration. "I can't do it, Grandma. I thought I could, but I can't." The incident deeply shook Emily's newly found confidence. Memories of the original accident came flooding back that night. The darkness, the suffocating feeling, the absolute terror of being trapped and immobile. She woke up screaming at 3 in the morning, drenched in cold sweat, convinced she was buried again. When Nathan arrived the next morning, he found a completely different Emily from the one he had left the day before. She had withdrawn again, her face pale and marked by deep shadows under her eyes red from crying. The wheelchair was now deliberately placed far from the table where they usually worked, as if Emily wanted to create a physical barrier between herself and any new attempt. "You won't believe what I thought of for the Explorer's next chapter," Nathan began cheerfully, pretending not to notice the change. "I don't want to talk about the Explorer anymore," Emily cut in, her voice rough. "It's a stupid story. Stories don't change reality." Nathan's enthusiasm faltered, but he persisted, carefully moving closer. "What happened?" "I tried to stand up by myself this morning," Emily answered, her words broken. "I thought I could make it to the window without the chair. I fell. I hurt myself. I had nightmares all night." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a purple bruise on her elbow. Then she lifted her chin in defiance, her eyes shining with a mix of anger and pain. "You made me believe I could walk again," accused Emily, tears streaming freely down her face. "You made me think it was possible, but it was just an illusion, a stupid story like the ones we make up. This is the reality." She slammed her hand hard on the armrest of the wheelchair. "This is real. The rest is a lie." Mrs. Margaret, who was watching from the doorway, made a move to step in and intervene, but Sarah stopped her with a subtle gesture, whispering something that made her reluctantly step back. Nathan stood still for a few moments, absorbing the impact of Emily's words and pain. Then, without saying a word, he pulled up the hem of his jeans, revealing a long, jagged scar running from his knee almost to his ankle. "You know how I got this?" he asked, his voice more serious than Emily had ever heard it. "Trying to ride my bike down a hill without using my hands. Everyone said it was dangerous, that I'd get hurt. And they were right." He let go of his pant leg and sat down beside the wheelchair, his expression serious but without a trace of pity. "You stood up the day before yesterday, didn't you?" Emily nodded reluctantly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "And you fell today, so what? When I learned to ride my bike after the accident, I fell 17 times. I counted every fall, every scrape. On the 18th try, I managed to ride without falling, even though my legs still hurt. It's not the same thing." Emily protested, her voice rising in frustration. "You only broke your leg. My spine is damaged. The doctors said it's exactly the same thing," Nathan insisted, cutting her off without ceremony. "The difference is, you've spent so long thinking you couldn't do it that now you're afraid to really try. You're afraid to fail, or maybe—" He hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe you're afraid to succeed." Nathan's words, harsh but sincere, silenced Emily. For a tense moment, she just stared at him, open-mouthed. The accusation that she feared success, not failure, struck her like lightning, illuminating corners of her mind she had carefully kept in the shadows. There was a truth there Emily had never considered. What if she could walk again? What would that mean for her identity now? For 3 years she had defined herself by the tragedy, by the limitation. Her anger, her bitterness, her isolation, all were anchored in her condition. Without the wheelchair, who would she be? The idea was both liberating and utterly terrifying. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice softer, almost a whisper. "If I try and succeed, everyone will expect me to go back to how I was before. The old Emily. But she died in that landslide. I don't know how to be that energetic, happy person again. I don't know if I can." It was the first time Emily had put this deep fear into words, this feeling that a fundamental part of her had been lost forever in the accident. Not just her mobility, but an innocence, a trust in the world that would never return. Nathan listened with surprising attentiveness for a child his age. When Emily finished, he remained silent for a few moments, processing what he'd heard. "Who says you have to go back to how you were before?" he asked finally. "The explorer, when she finds a new world, never comes back exactly the same. Every world leaves its mark on her, changes something. That's what makes her special." For the first time, someone was confronting her existential fear, not her physical limitation. Someone was acknowledging the internal transformation the trauma had caused, without trying to minimize or deny it. That afternoon, as they continued working on the story, Nathan suggested a change to the plot. What if the explorer found a river she couldn't cross the first time? What if she needed to try several times, building bridges that collapse until finally succeeding? Emily understood the message immediately. With a small smile, she picked up the pencil and began drawing the new scene. Emily's progress in the following days was visible. With the help of Nathan and Sarah, she began taking small steps supported by a special walker. Every little achievement was celebrated as a great victory. Mrs. Margaret, seeing her granddaughter improve day by day, decided to plan a surprise. She contacted Emily's old school friends, inviting them to a small garden party at the mansion. "No, Grandma," Emily protested when she heard about the party. "They'll just stare at me with pity." "No one will pity someone who's winning, Emily," Mrs. Margaret replied firmly. "You're fighting and making progress. That deserves to be celebrated." The party was scheduled for a Saturday, giving Emily 2 weeks to prepare. With Nathan's help, she intensified her exercises, determined to greet her old friends standing up, even if with support. It was during this time that a new obstacle arose. Mr. Kevin, Nathan's father and Sarah's ex-husband, unexpectedly appeared at the Thompson mansion. Divorced for 3 years, he rarely took part in his son's life. But now he demanded that the boy spend the rest of the vacation with him in Chicago. "It's my right as a father," Kevin insisted during a heated argument with Sarah in the garden, unaware that Emily and Nathan were listening from behind a door. "You barely see your son all year, and now you decide you want to spend time with him?" Sarah asked, exasperated. "Nathan is happy here, helping a friend who needs him." Kevin laughed dismissively. "A crippled friend? What does he get out of that? I'm taking him to the amusement park, the zoo, places where normal kids have fun." The cruel words hit Emily like a physical blow. Crippled, normal kids, terms that reignited all her insecurities. Nathan, seeing his friend's pain, stepped out of hiding and confronted his father. "I don't want to go with you. Emily is my friend, and I promised to help her." What followed was a tense scene, with Kevin insisting and threatening to involve his lawyers to enforce his parental rights. In the end, it was decided that Nathan would spend 1 week with his father, returning in time for Emily's party. The separation, even if temporary, was devastating for Emily. Without Nathan around, she withdrew again, refusing to do her exercises and spending hours staring out the window. "He's not coming back," Emily told her grandmother. "He'll have fun with normal kids and forget about me." Mrs. Margaret, worried about her granddaughter's regression, decided to take action. Secretly, she asked the driver to take her to Chicago, to the address where Nathan was staying with his father. Back at the Thompson mansion, Sarah continued Emily's therapy, but without the same success as when Nathan was present. "I know. You miss him?" Sarah said gently. "But Nathan believes in you, Emily. He told me so before he left. Don't you think you should keep trying to prove him right when he returns?" Emily considered the words for a moment. "What if he doesn't come back?" "He will," Sarah assured her. "I know my son. He never breaks a promise. On the 5th day of Nathan's absence, Emily was surprised by a knock on her bedroom door. When it opened, it wasn't Nathan who entered, but Mrs. Margaret carrying a package. "This came for you," her grandmother said, handing her the wrapped item. "It looks important." Emily opened the package anxiously, finding inside a sketchbook and a letter written in Nathan's uneven handwriting. "Dear Emily, I know I promised to be there every day to help with our story, but my dad insisted I spend some time with him. It's not as fun as he promised. I miss you and our explorer. I'm sending some drawings I made to continue our story. They're not as good as yours, but I did my best." On the last page, I drew the explorer facing a challenge that seemed impossible, a mountain so high no one had ever climbed it. But the explorer is like you, Emily. She doesn't give up even when everyone says it's impossible. She finds a way. I'll be back soon in time for your party. I promise. And when I return, I want to see what you've drawn for the next chapter of our story. Your friend Nathan. P.S. My grandmother told me sometimes the body forgets how to do things, but with practice it remembers again. Your grandmother said, "You're already managing to stand. That's amazing, Emily. Keep trying, even when I'm not there." Emily read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. On the last page of the notebook, just as Nathan had said, was the drawing of the explorer standing before a towering mountain. At the foot of the mountain he had written, "To climb 1,000 steps you must take the first one." That same afternoon, to Sarah's surprise, Emily asked to resume her exercises. "I want to draw the next chapter to show Nathan when he comes back," she explained with determination. "The explorer is going to start climbing that mountain, no matter how hard it is." The days that followed were filled with intense effort. Emily dedicated herself to the exercises with a determination that impressed everyone. Every small progress was recorded in her sketchbook as a new stage in the explorer's journey. When the day of the party finally arrived, Emily was nervous but confident. With Sarah's help, she chose a light blue dress and tied her hair in a braid, like the explorer in her story. Guests began arriving, old schoolmates, some neighbors, close family. Everyone had been instructed by Mrs. Margaret to treat Emily normally, without excessive care or pity. The most noticeable absence, however, was Nathan's. The party was set for 3 in the afternoon, and it was nearly 4 with no sign of the boy. "He'll come, I'm sure," Sarah repeated, though worry was clear on her face. Emily, sitting in her wheelchair in the garden, tried to focus on the conversations around her, but her eyes kept drifting to the front gate. Then she heard a commotion coming from the house, raised voices including her grandfather William Thompson's. Apparently there was some trouble at the mansion's entrance. Moments later, Mrs. Margaret appeared in the garden, accompanied by Nathan, who ran straight to Emily. Behind them came Kevin, Nathan's father, looking displeased. "Emily!" Nathan exclaimed, breathless. "Sorry I'm late." "My dad didn't want to bring me, so I ran away and took a bus, but I got lost and—" "You took a bus alone?" Emily interrupted, amazed by her friend's bravery. Nathan nodded proudly. "I promised I'd be here, didn't I?" Emily's smile lit up the garden. With a gesture, she asked Sarah to bring the special walker she'd been using for her exercises. "I have a surprise for you," she told Nathan. An expectant silence fell over the garden as Sarah positioned the walker in front of Emily's wheelchair. With visible effort but no hesitation, the girl leaned on the equipment and stood up. Then, with small, careful steps, she began walking toward Nathan. It was only 5 steps, but for someone who hadn't walked in 3 years, it was an enormous distance. When she got close enough, Emily let go of the walker with one hand and reached out to Nathan. "The explorer started climbing the mountain," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for believing I could do it." Not a single eye in the garden was dry. Even Kevin, who was watching the scene from a distance, seemed moved. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The party turned into a true celebration. Emily, alternating between her wheelchair when tired and short walks with her walker, was the center of attention, not out of pity, but admiration. Her old schoolmates, initially shy, soon chatted animatedly with her, making plans for when she returned to class. Kevin, impressed by what he'd witnessed, approached Sarah. I had no idea what Nathan was doing here, he admitted, embarrassed. I thought it was just a distraction for him. Our son has a huge heart, Sarah replied. Maybe you should spend more time with him to see that. The conversation between the two ex-spouses, though tense, opened the door to better understanding about co-parenting Nathan. Kevin, recognizing the value of his son's friendship with Emily, agreed to adjust the visitation schedule so the boy could keep helping with her recovery, even after the holidays ended. At the end of the party, when most guests had left, Emily asked for the attention of those still there, her grandparents Sarah, Nathan, and Kevin. "I want to show you something," she announced, asking Nathan to fetch her sketchbook from her room. When he returned, Emily opened it to the last page she'd drawn. "This is the next part of the story Nathan and I are creating. It's about an explorer who discovers impossible worlds. In this chapter, she started climbing a mountain everyone said was impossible to conquer." The drawing showed the explorer on the first steps of a spiraling staircase leading up the mountain. Beside her, a young adventure companion offered a helping hand. The explorer realized she didn't have to climb the mountain alone. Emily continued, "Sometimes we need someone who believes in us more than we believe in ourselves." Mr. William, usually reserved with his emotions, couldn't hold back his tears. In a rare gesture, he hugged his granddaughter tightly. "We're all here to help you climb that mountain, Emily. All of us." In the following weeks, Emily's recovery kept progressing. Her physical therapy sessions, now willingly accepted, were complemented by playful activities Nathan invented on weekends when he visited the mansion. The explorer's story grew alongside Emily's confidence. Every regained skill was recorded in a new chapter, with increasingly detailed illustrations. However, not everything was smooth in her recovery. After 2 months of steady progress, Emily suffered a setback when she tried climbing a small staircase without help and fell, twisting her ankle. The doctor recommended rest and a temporary pause from intensive therapy, leaving Emily deeply frustrated. "We'll have to postpone the explorer's next chapter," she told Nathan sadly during a visit. "She won't be able to keep climbing the mountain now." Nathan thought for a moment. What if, instead of climbing, the explorer found a cave in the mountain, a place where she could rest and learn new things to help her later, when she continues? The climb. The suggestion lit up Emily's eyes. "Like a training period." "Exactly," Nathan agreed excitedly. She could learn about the stars to navigate better, or about mountain plants that could help her recover faster. That same day, they started the new chapter. The idea of turning her recovery into a learning phase helped Emily accept the situation more peacefully. It was during this period of forced rest that Mrs. Margaret noticed something troubling. Despite her friendship with Nathan and the progress in physical therapy, Emily still refused to talk about the accident that had left her in a wheelchair. Whenever the subject was mentioned, even indirectly, the girl would change the topic or simply shut down. Concerned, Mrs. Margaret consulted the psychologist who occasionally saw Emily, Dr. Claudia Montgomery. "Emily needs to confront this trauma," the psychologist explained. "As long as she keeps the accident as a taboo, a part of her will remain blocked. But how can we help her? She refuses to talk about it." "Maybe she doesn't need to speak directly," suggested Dr. Claudia. "Emily is using the explorer's story as a way to process her feelings about her disability. Perhaps she can use the same approach to deal with the trauma of the accident." The psychologist's suggestion gave Mrs. Margaret an idea. That evening, she asked to see Emily's sketchbook, praising her granddaughter's talent. "This story is wonderful, dear," she remarked, flipping through the pages. "But you know what would be interesting? Learning about the explorer's origin, how she began her journey." Emily suddenly tensed. "The origin isn't important. What matters is where she's going. Every heroine has an origin story, Emily," Mrs. Margaret continued gently. "It's what makes her special, what sets her apart from other explorers." The seed was planted. In the following days, Emily seemed pensive, and Nathan noticed the change in his friend's behavior. "What's wrong?" he asked during one of his visits. "You're acting strange today." Emily sighed, fiddling with a pencil between her fingers. "My grandmother thinks we should create a chapter about how the explorer began her journey." Nathan brightened at the idea. "That would be amazing. We could show how she discovered the first portal or how she gained her powers. She doesn't have powers, Emily corrected. She's just an ordinary girl who found extraordinary worlds. Even better, Nathan exclaimed. It shows that anyone can become extraordinary, even without superpowers. The conversation continued for hours, with Nathan suggesting various possibilities for the explorer's origin. Emily listened, occasionally contributing but visibly uneasy. It wasn't until Nathan was about to leave that she finally spoke up. What if the explorer had been trapped? She asked softly. What if before finding the portals, she had been stuck in a dark and scary place, unsure if she'd ever get out? Nathan immediately sensed the gravity of the moment. He sat back down, attentive. What happened in that dark place? He asked gently. With tear-filled eyes, Emily began to tell the story. Not directly about the accident, but about the explorer who had been trapped under rubble after an earthquake. How she was alone in the dark, hearing distant voices that couldn't reach her. How she felt the weight on her legs and the fear of never seeing sunlight again. Nathan listened in silence, understanding that Emily was finally talking about her trauma through the character. And how did the explorer get out? He asked when Emily paused. She hesitated, her hands trembling. She hasn't completely gotten out yet. A part of her is still there, trapped under the rubble. But she's digging her way out, isn't she? Nathan pressed. Every day she removes a stone, makes a little more room to breathe. One day she'll be completely free. Silent tears streamed down Emily's face as she nodded. That's what we're drawing now, isn't it? Her journey to get out completely. That conversation marked a crucial turning point in Emily's recovery. In the following days, with Nathan's help, she drew the chapter about the explorer's origin, the accident, the rescue, the fear, but also the budding courage and the discovery of the first portal to an impossible world. A metaphor for her friendship with Nathan, which was opening new horizons. When she showed the finished chapter to Mrs. Margaret and Dr. Claudia, both recognized the enormous step Emily had taken in her emotional healing process. Physical progress also returned after her ankle recovered. Emily, now deeply committed to her rehabilitation, surprised the therapists with her determination. The walker was replaced by crutches, and then by a cane. Every milestone was celebrated with a new development in the explorer's story. As the end of the vacation approached, a new concern arose. With school starting again, Nathan wouldn't be able to visit Emily as often. Both children were anxious about the separation. I promise I'll come every weekend, Nathan assured her, and we can video call every day to keep working on our story. Emily tried to seem optimistic, but the fear of regressing without her friend's constant presence was real. It was Mr. William who found a solution. After several conversations with Sarah and consultations with inclusive education specialists, he proposed an ambitious plan. What if Emily returned to school this year? He suggested during a family dinner. Not her old school, but the one Nathan attends. Emily's eyes widened, a mix of fear and hope. I can go back to school. The doctor says you're physically ready, Mr. William explained. You'll need some adjustments and support, but you're more than capable. But it's in another city. We'd have to move, Mrs. Margaret noted, concerned. Not necessarily, Mr. William replied. I have an apartment near downtown, just 15 minutes from the school. You and Emily could stay there during the week, and we'd come back here on weekends and holidays. The idea of returning to school was both terrifying and exciting for Emily. It meant facing new challenges, meeting different people, exposing her condition to strangers. But it also meant staying close to Nathan and reclaiming an important part of childhood that the accident had taken away. After much reflection and several sessions with Dr. Claudia to prepare Emily emotionally, the decision was made. Emily would return to school the following semester, joining Nathan's class. The news was met with great enthusiasm by the boy, who immediately began planning how he'd introduce Emily to his friends and how they could continue the explorer's story during breaks. You're going to love school, Emily, he assured her. We have an art club with amazing drawing supplies, and our English teacher always encourages us to write creative stories. The last month of vacation was dedicated to intensifying Emily's physical preparation for school and adapting the family's downtown apartment to accommodate her needs. Mr. William, determined to provide the best for his granddaughter, hired top accessibility consultants. A preliminary visit to the school was arranged, where Emily met her future teachers and administrators, who were welcoming and prepared to support her. A special ramp was installed at the side entrance, and an adapted desk was provided for her classroom. Despite all the preparations, Emily's anxiety grew as the first day of school approached. The night before, sitting in her new bedroom at the apartment, she confessed her fears to her grandmother. "What if I can't keep up with the others? What if the kids laugh at me?" Mrs. Margaret gently stroked her granddaughter's hair. "Emily, do you remember what you learned from the Explorer? Every challenge is just a new adventure. You're not alone on this journey." That same night, Emily received a message from Nathan, a photo of his backpack already packed alongside a gift, wrapped in colorful paper. "I have a special present for you tomorrow. Is the Explorer ready for her new mission?" The shy smile that appeared on Emily's face as she read the message was a sign that, even though she was scared, she was willing to face this new chapter of her life. The first day of school dawned sunny. Emily, dressed in her school uniform, looked at herself in the mirror while Mrs. Margaret fixed her hair. The special cane, decorated with small drawings of the Explorer that she and Nathan had made, rested nearby. "You look beautiful, my love," said Mrs. Margaret, tears of pride in her eyes. "Your mother and father would be so proud of you." The mention of Emily's parents, who had passed away in a car accident when she was very young, always brought a pang of sadness. But today, somehow, the memory seemed to strengthen her determination. "They're watching." "Me, Grandma," Emily replied with surprising calm. "So the Explorer says there are parallel worlds where the people we love never stop looking out for us." The Thompson family car pulled up in front of the school at exactly 7:15 a.m. Mr. William had made sure to accompany his granddaughter on this important day, adjusting his meeting schedule. When Emily stepped out of the car, leaning on her cane, she found Nathan waiting on the sidewalk, shifting anxiously from foot to foot. When he saw her, his face lit up with a huge smile. "Emily!" he exclaimed, running toward her but stopping, at a respectful distance so as not to throw her off balance. "You actually came." "I promised, didn't I?" Emily replied, repeating the same words Nathan had used at the party. The boy laughed, understanding the reference, and held out the gift. He'd mentioned in the message, "This is for you, for good luck on your first day." Emily carefully opened the present, finding a golden compass-shaped pin inside. "So the Explorer never loses her way," Nathan explained, "even when the worlds around her seem strange and scary." Emily fastened the pin to her backpack strap, deeply moved by the gesture. Entering the school was a mix of curious glances, whispers, and a few shy approaches from children who wanted to introduce themselves. Nathan stayed by Emily's side the whole time, making introductions and casually explaining his friend's situation. "Emily was in an accident, but she's getting better every day. She draws better than anyone in this school, and we're creating an amazing story together." The morning went better than Emily had imagined. The teachers were attentive without being condescending, and the classmates, though initially curious about the cane, soon became more interested in the Explorer's adventures when Nathan mentioned the project during English class. At recess, sitting on a bench in the courtyard, Emily showed some interested classmates the drawings in her notebook. To her surprise, a girl named Olivia, known for her artistic talent, asked to contribute some scenery to the story. "I love drawing forests and waterfalls," Olivia explained shyly. "If you ever need backgrounds like that for the Explorer." It was the beginning of an unexpected expansion of the project. In the days that followed, other students expressed interest in contributing. A boy who liked creating imaginary maps, a girl who wrote poems that could be incorporated as riddles for the Explorer to solve. The English teacher, Mrs. Elizabeth, upon learning about the project, suggested it be developed as part of a special assignment for the school's cultural fair, which would take place at the end of the semester. "You could turn this story into an illustrated book," she proposed excitedly. or even a short play where each character represents an aspect of the explorer's journey. The idea was met with enthusiasm by Emily, Nathan, and the new collaborators. Together, they began expanding the explorer's universe, now enriched by diverse contributions that added depth to the original narrative. For Emily, the project became more than just a way to process her feelings about the accident and her disability. It turned into a bridge to new friendships and a way to reconnect with the school environment she had once feared so much. Physical therapy continued in parallel, with sessions 3 times a week after school. Progress was steady, though some days were better than others. The cane was still needed for longer distances, but at home and for short walks, Emily could now manage without support, though with a slight limp. It was during one of these physical therapy sessions that Emily met Ryan, an 11-year-old boy also undergoing rehabilitation after an accident. Unlike her, Ryan was at the beginning of his journey and often resisted the exercises, complaining of pain and exhaustion. Watching him from afar, Emily recognized the same discouragement she had felt before Nathan came into her life. During a break between exercises, she approached him. "It's tough at first," she remarked, sitting nearby. "Feels like it'll never get better, doesn't it?" Ryan looked at her in surprise, noticing the cane resting beside her. "You couldn't walk either?" Emily nodded. 3 years ago, after an accident. The doctors said I might never walk again, but I guess they didn't. Count on the power of friendship and imagination." Ryan's puzzled expression made Emily smile. She pulled a small sketchbook from her pocket, one she always carried with her. "Let me tell you about the explorer of impossible worlds." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The tale of the explorer, which had begun as a personal project between Emily and Nathan, now took on a new dimension. For Ryan, it became a source of inspiration during his physical therapy sessions, just as it had been for Emily. "It's like every exercise is a step up the explorer's mountain," the boy explained to his therapist, repeating the words he'd heard from Emily. "Even if it hurts, even if it's hard, every step brings me closer to the top." At school, the project for the cultural fair was taking shape. Emily and Nathan's class had split into teams: illustrators, scriptwriters, SETI, designers and actors for the short play inspired by the explorer's journey. Naturally, Emily led the illustration team, discovering a talent for guiding her peers and refining the visual style to maintain consistency. Nathan coordinated the scriptwriters, ensuring the essence of the original story remained intact despite the new contributions. Mrs. Williams, observing the children's involvement and dedication, remarked to Mrs. Margaret during a parent-teacher meeting, "Emily has turned her experience into something that benefits the whole class. She hasn't just overcome her physical limitations, she's found a way to help others face their own challenges." Mrs. Margaret couldn't hold back her emotions. "It's been a long journey, Mrs. Williams. There were days when we thought she might never smile again, let alone lead a project like this." The teacher nodded in understanding. "It's extraordinary what the right friendship can do." Nathan was the key that opened the door, but Emily needed to want to walk through it. And she didn't just walk through. She's now opening doors for others. The project grew beyond its initial expectations. What began as a story about a girl exploring impossible worlds evolved into a narrative about overcoming challenges, friendship, and the discovery that the true impossible worlds are the ones we build in our minds when we convince ourselves we can't overcome obstacles. In the story, the explorer, after climbing the mountain deemed impossible, discovered that the greatest treasure wasn't at the summit, but in the journey itself and the people she met along the way. For the cultural fair presentation, the class decided to create an immersive experience. Visitors would be guided through different worlds, represented by sets built in the classroom, each symbolizing a challenge faced and conquered. One of these worlds, suggested by a student named Sophia, who had recently lost her father, represented the Valley of Remembrance, a place where the explorer confronted painful memories and learned to transform them into strength to move forward. Sophia's contribution deeply touched Emily, reminding her of the parents she barely knew. The two girls, united by the experience of loss, worked together on the Valley set. incorporating meaningful elements for both of them. Preparation for the fair took up most of the children's free time. On weekends, when Emily returned to the mansion in Greenwich with her grandparents, Nathan often joined her, spending the entire Saturday finalizing project details. It was during one of these Saturdays, working in the mansion's garden, that Emily noticed something different. For the first time since the accident, she had gone an entire day without thinking about her physical limitation, completely absorbed in creative work. "Are you okay, Emily?" Nathan asked, noticing his friend had suddenly stopped drawing, her eyes glistening. "Yes," she replied with an emotional smile. "I just realized, well, today I didn't feel different even once. I didn't feel like the girl in the wheelchair or the girl with the cane. I was just Emily, the lead illustrator." Nathan smiled, understanding the magnitude of that realization. "How you've always been more than your wheelchair or cane to me, since day one." The week of the cultural fair finally arrived. The school buzzed with excitement as students from every class put the finishing touches on their projects. Emily and Nathan's class project, titled "Impossible Worlds: A Journey of Overcoming," had sparked curiosity throughout the school. The night before the presentation, during the final rehearsal, an unexpected mishap nearly ruined all their hard work. The Courage Peak set, representing the moment the explorer finally reaches the mountaintop, collapsed during setup, damaging part of the materials. Frustration was instant. Months of work seemed threatened by a last-minute accident. "We won't be able to rebuild everything by tomorrow," Olivia lamented, nearly in tears as she surveyed the damaged set. A wave of discouragement spread quickly among the students. Even Nathan seemed at a loss, staring helplessly at the wreckage. Surprisingly, it was Emily who remained calm. Leaning on her cane, she approached the fallen set and examined it carefully. "This isn't so different from what happened to the explorer during the avalanche on the mountain. Remember," she said firmly. "She didn't give up, she adapted." Her words caught everyone's attention. Emily continued, "What if instead of rebuilding it exactly as it was, we turned the accident into part of the story? The set could represent the moment the mountain shakes and everything seems lost, but the explorer finds a new path." The creative suggestion sparked murmurs of approval. Soon, everyone was working together to adapt the damaged setting, transforming it into an even more powerful representation of overcoming unexpected obstacles. The day of the cultural fair dawned with clear skies and pleasant temperatures, as if even the weather conspired for the event's success. Emily woke up early, a mix of anxiety and excitement making her heart race. Mrs. Margaret noticed her granddaughter's nervousness during breakfast. "Nervous, dear?" Emily nodded, absent-mindedly pushing her food around. "What if people don't understand the message of our story? What if they think it's childish or—" "Emily," her grandmother gently interrupted, "the explorer's story has already touched so many people. Your classmates, Ryan in physical therapy, Sophia who lost her father. Why would today be any different?" Mrs. Margaret's words calmed Emily. She was right. No matter how the fair reception went, the story had already served its purpose, helping people face their own impossible worlds. When she arrived at school, Emily found Nathan already putting the finishing touches on the exhibit. He rushed to meet her, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Emily, I came early to make sure everything's perfect. Are you ready for the big day?" Nathan's enthusiasm was contagious. Emily smiled, feeling her anxiety shift into determination. "I'm ready." The explorer faced much bigger challenges than a school fair. The classroom assigned to the project had been transformed into a circuit of worlds for visitors to walk through. Each world represented a stage of the explorer's journey, symbolizing different challenges: the Valley of Remembrance, the Forest of Fears, the Desert of Solitude, Impossible Mountain, and finally the Horizon of New Beginnings. Students took turns guiding visitors, explaining each world and its connection to real-life struggles. The first surprise of the day was the unexpected arrival of Ryan, the boy from physical therapy, accompanied by his parents. He still walked, with a slight limp recovering, but his smile when he saw Emily was radiant. "I came to see the explorer in action," he exclaimed, showing a drawing he'd made inspired by the story. "I started my own version. about a sailor who lost his leg in a storm but keeps exploring the seas. Ryan's presence was just the beginning. As the fair progressed, the Impossible Worlds exhibit became one of the most visited. Parents, teachers, and students from other classes crowded in to learn about the explorer's story and the worlds the children had created. Many visitors were moved as they walked through the Valley of Remembrance, recognizing their own losses in the delicate displays Emily and Sophia had made. Others connected with the Forest of Fears, where the explorer faced her deepest anxieties. Mrs. Williams, observing the project's impact, approached Emily during a quieter moment. "Do you know what's most extraordinary about your story, Emily?" the teacher asked with a kind smile. "Everyone finds something different in it, something that resonates with their own journey." Emily had never thought of it that way, but realized the teacher was right. What had started as a way to process her own trauma had become a mirror where others could see their own struggles and hopes reflected. The most touching moment of the fair came when Mr. William arrived, bringing a surprise. The doctor who had cared for Emily after her accident, Dr. Richard Fields. The doctor, visibly moved, walked through each world of the exhibit with genuine interest. "When I first saw you, Emily," he said at the end of the tour, "I feared the psychological trauma would be more limiting than the physical injury. Seeing what you've created from that experience, it's a powerful reminder of the human spirit." The fair concluded with a small theatrical performance where students reenacted key moments from the explorer's journey. To everyone's surprise, Emily had reserved a special role for herself. At the end of the play, using only a cane for light support, she stepped onto the stage as the narrator who revealed the story's moral. The explorer discovered that the truly impossible worlds are the ones we build in our minds, she declared in a clear, firm voice. Barriers that seem insurmountable become doors when we face them with courage, friendship, and imagination. Applause echoed through the room, many with tears in their eyes. Mrs. Margaret, seated in the front row, openly wept with pride. Beside her, Sarah, Nathan's mother, clapped enthusiastically, while Kevin, the father who had initially dismissed the children's friendship, seemed genuinely moved. At the fair's closing, the school principal announced the award-winning projects in different categories. Impossible Worlds received the top prize, Community Impact Project of the Year. The citation mentioned how the initiative had transcended the school environment, inspiring people of all ages to face their own challenges. By the end of the day, exhausted but radiant, Emily sat on a bench in the school garden, watching the people still milling about the fair. Nathan joined her, equally tired and satisfied. "We did it," he said simply, offering his friend a small bag of fruit candies he always carried in his pockets. Emily smiled, accepting a strawberry candy, her favorite. "Who would have thought?" "Huh? When you showed up in my room that first day, I just wanted you to leave." The two laughed, reminiscing about the rocky start of their friendship. "What happens now to the explorer?" Nathan asked after a comfortable silence. "She reached the mountaintop, found the treasure. Where does she go from here?" Emily looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the twilight. "The journey never ends, Nathan. There are always new mountains to climb, new worlds to explore. The important thing is to keep walking, even when the path seems impossible." At that moment, Emily stood up from the bench without using her cane, taking a few steady steps toward a small group of classmates waving at her. Nathan watched, a proud smile on his face. The explorer continued her journey, one step at a time, proving that no world, no matter how impossible it seems, is beyond the reach of those brave enough to explore it. The following months brought further progress in Emily's recovery. Physical therapy sessions continued, increasingly focused on strength and balance. The cane, once a constant necessity, was now used only on particularly tiring days or for longer walks. At school, the Impossible Worlds project led to unexpected developments. The principal, impressed by the initiative's impact, proposed turning it into a permanent program where students could use art and storytelling to process personal challenges. Emily and Nathan were invited to lead the first group, sharing their experience with other students. Children facing different struggles, from family issues to learning difficulties, found in the metaphor of impossible worlds, a way to express and confront their challenges. Dr. Richard Fields, struck by the therapeutic results of Emily's creative approach, invited her to speak about her experience at a symposium on pediatric rehabilitation. Accompanied by Nathan and supervised by her grandparents, Emily shared her journey with healthcare professionals, showing how imagination and friendship had been crucial elements in her recovery. "That what began as a fantasy story," she explained to the attentive audience, "became a map for navigating the real world. Every obstacle the explorer faced helped me understand and overcome my own challenges." The symposium's success led to the publication of an article in a specialized journal, highlighting the innovative approach that combined conventional therapy with creative expression. Sarah, the physical therapist and Nathan's mother, co-authored the article, documenting the specific techniques used in Emily's treatment. Emily's transformation wasn't just physical. The shy, bitter girl who hid in her room had become a natural leader, inspiring others with her resilience and creativity. At school, she was often sought out by classmates facing difficulties, always willing to listen and share her unique perspective. At home, Emily surprised her grandparents by expressing a desire to visit the accident site, the ecological park, where the landslide had occurred. After careful consideration and consultations with Dr. Claudia, the psychologist, the visit was arranged as part of her emotional healing process. "I don't want to be afraid of that place anymore," Emily explained. The explorer faced the cave where she was trapped. "I need to do the same." On the day of the visit, Emily invited Nathan to accompany her. The park, rebuilt after the accident, was unrecognizable, with new trails and safety structures. The exact site of the landslide had been transformed into a memorial garden, featuring native plants and educational plaques about disaster prevention. Walking slowly, leaning lightly on Nathan when needed, Emily moved through the garden in silent contemplation. When they reached the center, where a small fountain symbolized renewal, she finally spoke. "For a long time, I thought a part of me was still trapped here, under the rubble. But it wasn't. I came out whole, even if changed." Nathan squeezed her hand in silent support, understanding the depth of the moment. "You know what the explorer would say now?" he asked after a pause. Emily smiled, wiping away a single tear. "Every place we visit becomes part of our story, but no place defines our destiny." "Exactly," Nathan agreed. "You're not what happened here. You're what you chose to do afterward." That visit marked another turning point in Emily's journey. Confronting the site of her trauma was like closing an important chapter, allowing new ones to be written without the constant shadow of the past. When they returned to the mansion that day, Emily made an unexpected request. She wanted to organize a special celebration to thank everyone who had contributed to her recovery. "Not just a regular party," she explained to her grandparents, "but an exploration day, where everyone can experience a little of the journey we've been on." The idea was met with enthusiasm. Over the following weeks, Emily, with Nathan and her grandparents' help, planned every detail of the event. The mansion's garden would be transformed into different worlds inspired by the explorer's story, each representing a stage of her recovery. Invitations were sent not only to close family and friends, but also to Dr. Richard Fields, Ryan and his parents, the physical therapy team, Mrs. Williams, and even the classmates who had contributed to the school project. Exploration Day dawned perfectly, with a blue sky and mild weather. The garden was unrecognizable, decorated with arches, panels, colorful tents, and interactive installations. Each area had been meticulously planned to represent a different aspect of Emily's journey. At the center of the garden stood a miniature replica of Impossible Mountain, with a spiraling trail leading to the top. Near the entrance, the Valley of Beginnings displayed photos of Emily before and after the accident, telling the start of her story. The guests began arriving promptly, welcomed by Mrs. Margaret and Mr. William. Emily and Nathan, positioned at the start of the path, handed each visitor an exploration map and a small decorative compass, similar to the pin Nathan had given Emily on her first day of school. "Welcome to the explorer's journey," Emily announced in a clear, confident voice. Each world you'll visit represents a challenge overcome, a lesson learned. But remember, the real treasure isn't the destination, but the path you take. The guests were then guided through the different worlds. In the Desert of Doubt, they experienced a mirror maze where distorted reflections represented self-imposed limitations. In the Forest of Fears, they were invited to write their own fears on small slips of paper, tying them to the branches of a tree specially set up for the event. At the River of Perseverance, an installation with real water demonstrated how small, steady efforts, represented by water droplets, could eventually carve a path through seemingly solid obstacles. At each station, volunteers, including Ryan, now further along in his own recovery, shared stories related to the world's theme, creating a deeply personal and reflective experience. The most emotional moment came when all the guests gathered around Impossible Mountain. Emily, dressed as the explorer from her illustrations in a denim overall identical to the one she'd worn the day she took her first steps for Nathan, stood at the base of the mountain. 3 years ago, I believed. I'd never walk again, she said, her voice carrying clearly to everyone present. Every step felt like an impossible mountain to climb. Today I want to show you the journey that brought me here. Without a cane or any support, Emily began climbing the spiral path of the miniature mountain. Her steps were firm, determined, though a slight unevenness in her gait was still noticeable. Nathan walked a few steps behind, not as support, but as a fellow traveler. When they reached the top, Emily raised her hands in triumph, prompting emotional applause from the crowd. Mrs. Margaret openly wept, leaning on Mr. William, who tried to hide his own tears behind his glasses. The explorer's journey doesn't end at the mountaintop, Emily continued, looking at the faces turned toward her, because there are always new worlds to discover, new challenges to face. What matters is remembering that no world is truly impossible when we have the courage to explore and friends to walk beside us. Emily's words resonated deeply with the guests. Dr. Richard Fields, visibly moved, remarked to Sarah, "In 20 years of medicine, I've never seen such an extraordinary recovery, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. She didn't just walk again, she found a greater purpose." The celebration continued into the evening, with music, food, and many shared stories. Exhausted but radiant, Emily and Nathan finally sat on a bench away from the crowd to watch the activity. "We did it, didn't we?" Nathan said, looking at his friend with admiration. "You climbed your impossible mountain," Emily smiled, gazing at the sky as stars began to appear. "We climbed it. I never could have reached the top alone. You're the one who showed me the mountain wasn't as impossible as I thought." "And what comes after the mountaintop?" Nathan asked, curious about his friend's future plans. Emily looked toward the horizon, where the sun set in shades of orange. After the mountain, a new horizon, of course, new worlds to explore, new stories to tell. The explorer never stops, only changes direction. And so, under the starry sky, Emily and Nathan began planning the next chapter of their shared story. No longer a tale of limitations overcome, but of endless possibilities unfolding before them. Because, as the explorer had discovered, the only truly impossible worlds are those we choose not to explore. And Emily, the girl who once believed she would never walk again, now knew her journey was just beginning, one step at a time, toward horizons that once seemed unreachable. The end of the story. Dear listener, were you moved by Emily and Nathan's journey? Let us know in the comments which moment touched your heart. If you've ever overcome an impossible world in your own life, share your experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.